So, hi, welcome
Hi.
to the Dark Night of the Soul Unwrapped.
Woohoo.
It's funny, because I was thinking this morning in all the many hundreds of conversations that we've had since 2011, I genuinely don't think I know the answer to this question, which is what was happening in your life around the time just before your Dark Night of the Soul began?
Yeah. And I've been thinking about that question too. I would say a few things. I would say one of the biggest impacts on me was my cousin's daughter died. She was 12 years old. She
Oh,
just dropped dead in gym class. And that was like, oh my, like children are not supposed to die. Like that, you know, I can't even imagine anything worse than that.
oh,
And so that set me on a path of like seeking and holistic healing and all that. And as I was going through all these new things I was learning, I realized it was really all for me because my whole life, my energy was directed outward, trying
hmm.
to be good enough, trying to get love, trying to, whatever. And then as I started doing holistic work, my attention turned inward and I realized there is so much in here. that, holy cow, right? But the other thing I was thinking of was I remember even as a kid thinking about death a lot.
Hmm.
Like, what is the point of life if we are just going to die? Like, there's no point. And I, I think a lot of that it got really big around puberty, like around 12 years old. I remember really feeling that just like, and I think, I had grandparents die. So I think that was part of what prompted a lot of it. So death really was one of the major factors.
Mm.
That's really what was going on. And then, as you know, probably 10 years after, maybe not even 10 years after my cousin's daughter died, I got sick. So health issues prompted a lot as well. Yeah.
So, yeah, so that awful, tragic death happened, and then you started seeking it. At what point did it start to feel like the crumbling began, as it were? At what point did it switch from this seeking new discoveries going on and become something else, become the kind of falling apart that we know happens at the start of the Dark Night?
Yeah. I think that that death was that point where the things started to like fall apart. Like it felt like rock bottom.
Right, right.
Like there's nowhere else to go from here. It's just hell. And I think that was a I think that was really the catalyst and that rock bottom point where um everything just started and my life started falling apart.
So what?
Work, health, health came a little bit
Yeah.
later, relationships, all
Mm,
of that.
right. What was your work at that point?
I was working in banking. I was in banking for like 25 years, doing a lot of different things. I worked in a call center. I managed incentive plans. I did a lot of some operations stuff. I worked in business banking for a brief period. I worked in sales and marketing back office stuff for a period. So like 25 years in
Wow.
banking.
So that's then going, you start to discover all this holistic stuff, exploring that's such a completely different world, isn't it?
Completely different world. Yes. But I kind of kept them compartmentalized. Like there was a point where I really wanted to leave the banking and get full time into doing holistic work as my work. But, I wasn't making any money at that. And I was making a lot of money in banking.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
So, but it was when I got sick that the universe basically kicked me out. Like
Right.
I couldn't function. I couldn't work. So, and fortunately, that was in 2008. because that's when like the whole country, the whole US kind of
Mm.
went into a bad time and the whole country got laid off. And fortunately, I got laid off and it was actually the best thing that ever happened.
Yeah, I mean it's interesting because we were very much in parallel, even though we
We
didn't know
were.
each other. I mean, mine started
Right.
in 2007, so we were kind of pretty much on track. There's something I think about what you just said about being forced out of everything you knew, isn't there? The work, relationships, all of that. What happened relationships wise? Was there change there too?
Um, I had been in some long-term relationships, almost got married a couple times, but I just couldn't do it. And I'm happily single still. Um, so I think it was around the time I was is early 40s, I guess, when I was just starting to get sick. I was living with someone. We were engaged. I realized like I just can't do it. I actually wasn't getting sick at that point. So I ended that relationship. Um, and then I moved, I bought a condo, I met someone else. We only went out a few times and just something in me went, no. And part of that was because I was starting to get sick and I didn't know what was happening with me. And I knew I just had to figure this out first, before it got worse, which obviously it did get much, much worse from that. But like, there was just something like, it's not for me. I need my life to be about me.
Mm,
I grew up with, the wife does everything. The husband works, the wife takes care of the home and the kids and all that. And like, that was just absolutely not for me.
yeah, yeah.
And it's fine for some people. People love that. And I respect that. It just was not for me.
So what point in all of this did you come across the concept that this might be a dark night of the soul or spiritual crisis? I mean, when did that kind of come into view, as it were, or did you just think it was other things for a long time?
I think I thought it was other things for most of the time. Used to listen to a lot of Jeannie Zandy. She talks a lot about the dark night of the soul. And then when I met you, you talked about the dark night of the soul and it just made sense. Like, oh, that's what's going on. This is like the dark night of the soul to me is actually a spiritual awakening in some ways, right? We have to go through our inner hell in order to to heal.
Yeah, wow. So it was more of a retrospective realizing that that's
It
what
was,
had been going on. Yeah.
yeah.
And what was hell like for you?
Hell was I was a perfectionist, that one on the Enneagram, right?
Yeah,
And
I'll
and that
I'll I'll just to say for people who have never heard of the Enneagram, I'll put some links in the show
yeah,
notes for that. But can you just sum it up in a couple of sentences what that
I'll
means?
try.
I know that's quite hard.
That means I was in constant judgment of myself and literally everybody else.
Right.
And that judgment was all about I'm not good enough. Like that belief was so strong in me. I will never be good enough no matter what. And so that it was a constant striving to be good enough by basically criticizing myself, everything about myself and everything around me.
And presumably that not being able to be good enough is really about not being able to be perfect.
Yes. Right. And what is perfect?
Right. I mean, it
Right.
depends on having that kind of
Right. That
ideal
idea of
image.
perfectionism
Right.
would mean I would be okay.
Mm.
And the,
So,
and the exhaustion like that came from that. My God, right? And the constant in fight, flight, freeze, right? Constant what's the word I'm thinking of? Sorry, I told you my brain isn't working well today. Um
like nervous system activation or that
yes.
kind of,
Yes.
right. So for me, I mean, it's interesting you used the word hell because for me the word was often the underworld. It felt like I was in the underworld in the dark, and for me that involved huge amounts of fear and anxiety, um, lots of crying, a real sense of being completely unable to cope with normal life. You know, even I don't know, going to the shops or
Yeah.
so. What was it like on a day to day basis for you?
I would say anxiety, I didn't recognize it as fear, although in retrospect, again, I think it was a lot of fear. Um, for me, it was more anger and, the perfectionist, that righteousness, right?
Right, right.
So,
Interesting.
yeah. So me, it was more like an indignant almost sometimes, like, "Oh, I'm not going to be that. I'm not going to do that. I would never do that." You know, we can laugh about it now, right?
Right, right, absolutely. I mean, we know how incredibly painful those that
So
patterning
painful.
is, right?
Yes.
And presumably when you started to explore spirituality and all the holistic stuff, did that compound the idea of what perfection was? Was there then an idea of a spiritual perfection that you should
Oh,
be able to reach?
oh gosh, absolutely. Yes. Enlightenment. It was the end game, right? Because then I would be perfect, would no longer suffer, would no longer be in pain. I'd be happy and blissful all the time, right? Like
Right.
that's the big lie about it.
Yeah.
So yes, and I did go through periods of that spiritual ego, like, oh, well, I've got something other people don't, right?
Right.
Yes, I
Right.
absolutely went through
Yeah.
this,
I mean, it reminds
which
me,
was also painful.
uh, completely. I mean, it's really interesting, isn't it? Because I think when we start to see what those patterns are, we start to see what our draw towards enlightenment is, or the idea of enlightenment or awakening,
Yeah,
or whatever we want to call that. I
right.
think for me, there was such a deep sense that there's something irretrievably wrong with me.
Yeah.
That then obviously that idea of um yeah, reaching this state of you just described where there would be no suffering, blah blah blah. Yeah, at what point did that start to fall apart? Like, when did you start to become disillusioned around all of that? Was that when you started to get ill and perfectionism was even further out of reach, or was it more
No,
gradual than that?
I would say it was more gradual than that. After doing a lot of inner work and working with you a lot and working together, I think the getting sick actually exacerbated it. Like, this can't happen to me. Like, I've done
Right.
everything right. I was vegetarian for 12 years. I'm very holistic. I don't take medications. I don't drink. I don't, like, it's like, this can't happen. And so I was like on this aggressive path to figure out what was wrong with me and fix it. Like, cause I'm not going to live the rest of my life like this. I am gonna do something. I've got to do something. So
Right.
for many years of that, it was like that.
And was that again the anger kicking in around like this cannot happen? Was there anger at that happening to you? Because like you say, you'd done everything right.
Yeah. Right, it was that righteousness. I would say yes, anger, but also a lot of fear at that point.
Right. Right.
So a
Because
lot of fear came in
presumably
around that.
then is your I mean, I know from my experience, as your body starts to feel uncontrollable, right? There's all these things
Yes,
happening that no matter what you do, it, it's not being fixed, right?
that's
I think
right.
there's something really quite terrifying in that.
Absolutely terrifying, yes. Because you're out of control. That control is
Yeah,
a good word. There's no control,
yeah.
and that was terrifying.
So here you are, and it was, I've obviously got a very parallel experience. We're in hell or the underworld. We're also getting sick. And at the same time, there's these ideas about awakening and, all of that stuff going on. I'm reminded of a line from the Dark Knight book that I wrote, where I say something like, "The lure of enlightenment, tailor made for perfectionists with low self-esteem." And
Right
and
on. You
and
just hit the
just
nail on the head.
just thinking about all the dead ends we went down, like all of those times of thinking like, oh, this is it. Like if I just do this, if I just grasp
Right.
that, if I, whatever it is, whether it's taking some sort of supplement or teaching or whatever that is, like
Mhm.
how many times we went through that cycle of disappointment and having to come face to face again with what we were trying to not face
Right.
fundamentally.
Exactly. Right. And that real you're that's a good way to say it. The things we were trying not to face had to be faced.
So I mean, looking back at all of this now, what would you say the dark night of the soul is?
Looking back on it, I
Mm.
would say, it's an opportunity.
Right. Wow. Yeah, say
But
more.
I can only say that from looking back on it. I certainly couldn't have said that when I was in it,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah.
Because when you're in it, you're just suffering. It's just pure suffering, like never ending, constant suffering, pain, emotional pain, mostly, but also physical, can include physical pain.
Yeah. So yeah, say more about the opportunity because I'm sure there will be people listening to this who are in it who for
Yes.
whom that yeah, absolutely makes no sense, and I really get that. I mean, I would not have felt it like that at all. I mean, for me, it was like
Right.
it felt like utter failure, utter
Hmm.
disaster.
Yes.
So yeah,
I think if I didn't go through that, nothing would have changed. I wouldn't have changed. I would have stayed the way I was. I would have been a perfectionist my whole life. I would have been constantly judging myself, judging others, not knowing, maybe not even knowing that there was something wrong. Like this is just life and me, and this is just how I am. And so for me, that's how it was an opportunity. It forced me to stop and turn my attention from outward to inward.
so yeah, picking up on what happened. So you'd been going along, you were working, had this long career in banking. What then started to happen when you got ill?
Well, I didn't know what was wrong. It started with vertigo. I'd never had vertigo before. I didn't know what it was. A friend came and picked me up at 10 o'clock at night and took me to the hospital because I didn't know what was wrong. And they wanted to give me like major drugs. And fortunately, my friend was with me and she said, no, she doesn't want that. So basically, I mean, I can still occasionally get a little bit of vertigo, but I take a Dramamine and take a nap and I'm fine. Um, sorry, where was I?
Just
Um,
at the beginnings of getting ill,
the beginnings
getting
of getting
vertigo
ill.
and not
Yes.
knowing.
And the thing is, like, I never got better. I just kept getting worse after that instance. And the worst was fatigue, like extreme fatigue, like brain fog where I couldn't even think straight. I would literally stand in my kitchen thinking, I'm supposed to eat something, but I don't know how to do that. I don't know what to do to get myself food. Like the brain fog was just so intense and the fatigue, I could barely drag myself out of bed. I couldn't work. So fortunately I was able to work from home, but I was doing a terrible job because, I couldn't function. I didn't know what was wrong with me. Went to many, many doctors, and that's a whole other story. Um, and the company was going through this round of layoffs, and I got laid off. And at first I was really upset by that. And then I was like, oh, thank God. I felt joy, like, oh, thank God, this is such a relief. Because then I could focus on what was wrong with me and work on I'll be better in a few weeks. That was what I did.
Right, right.
I've got this.
I can absolutely remember at the beginning of my dark night, in all sincerity, I can remember saying, like, I know that this is really profound and it's going to take 2 or 3 months before I get back to, you know, I mean,
And then
wow.
years later, right?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah,
So you were talking about that whole impulse, which I think we all have to to some degree, don't we? That we live in a culture, we live in a fix it culture, don't
we
we?
do.
There's something wrong with you, you fix it. And within, I think particularly within spirituality and the holistic world, there are so many what I call overcoming narratives. So everybody's putting out books or posts
Right.
or whatever saying, so here's
Inspirational, inspiring,
right.
right?
So
Mhm.
they go something along the lines of X was wrong with me. I did Y. Now I'm perfectly better. If you too have got X, I'll sell you Y and you will recover too. And I think
Right.
there's something so fundamentally problematic with that. I I find that so difficult now in retrospect, even though I fell for that myself. There were
Yeah, me
times I
too.
would look to something and think, oh, maybe this is the thing. At, at what point did you start to have experiences of that fix it energy starting to drop in some way?
Mm. I think it was probably several years, and because even after you and I met and were working together, it was still going on for at least a couple of years. But there was some point, I think, honestly, I think it was this point. It was that time that I did it because I just, this is one thing I don't remember a lot, but I remember this. There was a point where I was using inquiry to look for enlightenment because enlightenment was going to give me everything I wanted, and I couldn't find it. And
Huh,
it didn't exist. And the whole seeking for it dropped away.
right.
And I think that was one of the turning points. And then another turning point, I think, was one morning I sat up in bed. This was after I was sick for years. I lost my house. I was staying with a friend. I sat up in bed one morning and I said, all right, every non-dual teacher out there says the same thing. You already are what you're looking for. So logically, I said to myself, because I'm very left brained, that means every step I take toward this thing that I think I want is actually a step away from it. So I sat in bed for, I think it took like 45 minutes. I sat in bed for 45 minutes and I just sat and tried to stay fully present here. And then every time my mind started to go out, I would notice it and I'd bring it back. And then something started to shift there as well.
Hmm.
Because I was so addicted to self inquiry at the time that because I knew I could get through whatever the emotional thing was that I was having in the moment. I knew it was like, oh, I know what's on the other side of that. So I have to inquire it away, more fix it. Right.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it feels like uh that whatever we want to call this self structure or ego or whatever, although I'm not really a fan of that word, but
Oh,
it I think it's really natural and understandable, but it tries to find any method it can to to stay out of the pain,
right.
right? And it can get quite sophisticated at that, can't it? It can use something like inquiry, and obviously there are many different forms of that,
Right.
but it can take something to, and I think it's easy to kid ourselves that we're doing the work in some way, when actually that very movement of whatever notion it is we have of doing the work is actually holding us out of what's really here, like you say.
Hmm.
And
Right.
I think there's something, I think there are degrees of subtlety in the idea of being present. I think actually to really be present to ourselves as we are in the moment is one of the hardest things that we can do from that perspective, isn't it? That there's so much energy, as you were saying earlier, there's a deep exhaustion in that too, that we spend all of this time trying to stay out of whatever the deepest pain is. And I think there's some deep wisdom in that, in the sense that, as we know, we need to have the capacity to be with it, right?
Yes.
And I think
Yes.
you and I mean, I'm speaking for both of us here, I think we would both agree now that this is something that takes many, many years and doesn't have an end point, right?
Yes.
I
Yes.
think when we were in that phase, the phase you were talking about, there was still a persistent idea that if we just did the right thing, there would be this arrival,
Right.
right?
Yes.
At which
Mhm.
all of that, somehow the pain reservoir would somehow magically empty.
Right.
And I think what's fascinating is that whilst we know that isn't what happens, it isn't that there isn't any change, right?
Right.
Things do unravel, things do
Yes.
come apart. And yeah, I think it's really significant that you remember that moment, those 45 minutes of really just staying with it.
Right. Because it is difficult. It's easy to be with the good stuff, the good feelings, right? And we want those to last forever. It's hard to be with the painful stuff. And that is, we need to be able to be with both.
I mean, we're so uneducated about that, in a sense, aren't we? In the real sense, I don't. There's
Right.
no sort of
Right. It's
reproach in
conditioning.
that. I mean,
Right.
we're actually taught to stay out of it, aren't we? We
Yes.
live in a world of rampant denial, of minimizing, of the minimizing of pain, right? And obviously, depending on who you are, your experiences are minimized and denied even further.
Mhm.
And I think there's something for me, when I was in the midst of the dark night of the soul, there was the odd moment when I just couldn't hold myself out of it any longer. And I would drop into the realness of whatever was here in the moment. And much as that was really painful and there was a lot of shame attached to that, there was also often a deep relief in those moments. The
Yeah.
relief of, like, yeah, this is what's actually here. Like, this is the
Right.
reality,
Yes.
honestly. And I think we have so many layers of kind of dishonesty wrapped up in all of this
Right.
because, like you said,
We
conditioning,
deny. Right. We're denying what we're feeling.
right?
Another thought I had is we also had each other. We had support. So yes, we were still doing our own inner stuff, but we also had each other and we had a support network, non-judgmental, like nobody saying, "Oh, don't oh, it's going to be okay," or you know, you don't need to feel that way. It's just like, yeah, let's yeah, I'm here with you while you're going through this. And I think that's so important, and so many people don't have that.
Absolutely. I mean, that was one of the main motivations for writing the book and for doing this. I mean, until we met, really, for the first 4 years of mine, I didn't really have anybody. There were a couple of people who I think recognized the nature of what I was going through, but not people who were really in my life in any way. And certainly, yeah, I mean, it's an intensely lonely experience, isn't it? Because for me, it was either misinterpreted by people around me. Um, my partner at the time just kept on saying, this is depression. And and whilst I could really understand why he thought that, there were I was crying a lot for starters, right? I knew in my being that that wasn't what that was. That it that there was something else going on that had movement to it, even if it might look the same day by day by day. There was something happening because in those moments when I did drop through into the reality of the emotion, I would then connect with something else. I would then connect with something, and I mean, we're going to struggle with words here, I'm
Yeah.
guessing,
Yeah.
but I would connect with what often felt like you, as in some kind of, you know, I don't know, some sort of sense of you. And whether we call that God or universe or presence or whatever word we
Life,
use for
what,
that,
yes,
life,
whatever,
right?
whatever. Mhm.
Just the sense of space and holding in that, you know, I would often felt like manna from heaven. And it wouldn't happen very often, right? I mean, I could go weeks or possibly even months. But did you start to have a sense like, oh, there's something the other side of this? There's something that I'm being called to, or some much deeper point to this, even than feeling all the pain.
Absolutely. Like that was what the seeking was for because I knew it was there. I just didn't know how to get to it. Right. And that's what the addiction to self inquiry became because I knew what was on the other side of the pain. But and I also had to get through the pain. I couldn't avoid it. I couldn't get around it. I had to go through it to get to it. Now, in retrospect, was that always necessary? I don't know. Maybe, maybe not. But yes, I had those experiences, as you know, still have them, but they're not abiding. It's not like I'm always living in this state of, oh, you know,
Right.
you
Right.
know,
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. So, yeah, same here.
yeah.
I mean, I really wonder because I think a lot of us have this sense that there's something else, right? Like you were saying. Is your sense that we somehow remember that, or there's just something in us that knows that's the case, even though it feels like it's unreachable?
Is really a good question. I don't know. I don't know the answer to that. I mean, if I think back, like even as a kid, I think we somehow knew, right? Like things would be
Yeah,
happening around me and something in me would just know, like, no, this isn't right. This isn't how it's supposed to be. Like we're
yeah,
missing something here.
right, right. Yeah, I mean,
Yeah.
ultimately, it's very mysterious, isn't
It
it?
is mysterious.
But I think there's something it's something really paradoxical in the seeking bit, isn't it? Because we did all of that running around, and certainly for me, particularly in the first 3 or 4 years of the Dark Knight, looking back, I was really like a desperate and very frantic headless chicken, right? running around to different practitioners and teachers and all of that. And I think maybe that is just part of what this is. Maybe that is part of the process, that there isn't some neat, orderly way to to get through this, that it is messy and visceral and and it can't not be that. I think
Yes.
what feels paradoxical to me now is that for the last few years, so obviously, many years on from 2007, what's become what becomes more and more clear is that all I need to do is basically lie and breathe, and whatever's here is here. And there's an intelligence to the unfolding that's happening, that has nothing to do with my ideas about it. Right?
Yeah.
There's no plan, there's no sense of like, oh, this
Right.
is how I need to be with things, or none of that. And yet I'm sure if I was sitting with, the younger me going through this in 2007, that would have been really hard for her to grasp, because it would have been pretty much unbearable to be that present.
Right. Right. Unbearable, and we also didn't have the tools. We didn't know. Like, nobody ever taught us
Right.
that.
Yeah.
And yes, it also would have been unbearable. It was unbearable, which is why we were seeking so
Right.
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 Mm.
Absolutely. Yeah. Yeah. At what point did it start to feel to you like you were really emerging out of it in some way,
Mm.
or did that happen?
Yeah, I feel like that has happened. Um, but I'm probably only in the last 3 or 4 years, maybe? 4 or 5 years? Like,
Yeah.
it took a long, long, long time. Yeah.
And how much of that do you think was to do with the illness component? I mean, I know it's really difficult to separate these things out, isn't it?
It really is, yeah.
And and I think both of us really relate to this idea of being physically stopped. I
Yes.
certainly do. It's like there was
Yeah.
something in me just that knew almost that the only way to stop me was to physically stop me.
Right.
Right?
Mhm. Mhm.
I think we were both quite driven and quite, you know,
Yes.
busy and all of that stuff
Mhm.
beforehand. And I'm also aware that you was stopped physiologically in in definitely a much more extreme way than me. Can you say a bit more about that, and how you feel like, if it's possible, how that interacted with the deeper levels of unfolding that were going on?
I think a lot of the inner work I did was around feeling like a victim because of my health issues. Like, and of course that it was much deeper than that, you know,
Right.
but the health issues started it. And then I realized, like, I have a lot of victim um, energy here. And so I did a lot of inner work on that, but I also had to take care of the physical, right? And like you, I went to tried many different things. So many people thought they knew what was wrong with me. And if you just do this, and I know they meant well, but it wasn't that. So, um, what else did I do? I mean, so many different practitioners I went to, so many different things I tried, spent so much money,
Mm.
trying to heal. And it actually took me moving to California to find a doctor who could help me. And I will be on his protocol for the rest of my life, and it's the best thing. that ever happened. And as my body has been healing and I'm able to do more, I do think it coincides with, I'm not quite sure of the connection, but like it does feel like, yes, as my body becomes stronger and more stable, certainly than it was, um, my inner world has as well. And maybe that's because there's just not as much fear,
Right.
because the body is better than it was. It is kind of a mysterious thing. It's like, which came first, the chicken or the egg, right?
Yeah, completely, completely. And I know we're going to have a longer conversation about this, talking about um, illness and the dark night and spirituality in a bigger way, because I think there's so much to unpack in that, isn't there?
Yeah.
But I think there's something about what you said about going to different practitioners. In my experience, by definition, almost everybody is seeing through their particular lens, right? So you
Yeah.
go to somebody who, I don't know, specializes in trauma. Of course, they're going to say it's trauma related. And you go to somebody whose thing is hormones and I think particularly when
Right.
we have these kind of conditions, um, mine is Hashimoto's, an underactive thyroid condition. And what was yours?
Mine's, which I didn't know. It took like many years to get an actual diagnosis. They thought it was EDS, but I don't think it's that. The doctor in California said it is fibromyalgia.
Right.
And he had, his way of testing to confirm that's what it was for him. And he's been helping people for 40 years with this, and it's just life changing.
I mean, it
But I think it's a combination, right? Don't you?
right, right,
Is that
absolutely.
where you going with that? Like it's a
Yeah,
combination of, yes, maybe there is trauma and hormones and, you know, many other things piled on.
right.
It's not just one thing, and it doesn't take just one thing, and it's not the same thing for everybody that will get them through it. Everyone has to
Completely.
find their path.
Yeah, yeah. And I think then there's something about, you use the word opportunity about this. And I think, as we said, that's not how we would have seen it at the time. But
No.
I think one of the huge gifts or opportunities for me has been the breaking down of all of those ideas in a sense, that I can't just look at things and go, oh, that equals that, or well, that's that. That we've been forced in a way to constantly have those ideas sort of fall apart on us. And every time we've tried to hold on to something and go, oh, it's that. I mean, we've laughed about this many times,
We
haven't we?
have.
Every time we think like, oh,
That's it.
I've got it. I've absolutely reached the bottom. It's like that falls away. It's like, oh, okay, so here's the next thing. And I think then there's something about the kind of openness that gives rise to, and a lack of ideology, I guess, right? We haven't been able to hold on to beliefs in that way because
Anything.
because
Right.
they just kind of didn't work,
Right.
right?
Every time we believed something so strongly, something would come in to show us the opposite. So it just kind
Right.
of forces you to just question everything.
Yeah, yeah.
Mhm.
And I think, like you said, to be much more inclusive, to be able to say, yes, yes, trauma, yes, hormones, yes, all of these things, but to be able to hold all of that without a kind of rigidity,
Yes.
right? And I
Right.
think ultimately what this is about is, I mean, as you say, it's like we set off, I think both of us very much with these ideas of what we needed to become. Like if I just reach this ideal version of me, this sort of perfect, perfect Julianness,
Right.
that everything would be okay, right? And I think something so much richer and deeper and more valuable happens, isn't it? That we actually get to find out what this is, what we are exactly
Right.
as we are,
Yes.
with all of the glorious foibles and dysfunctions and bodies that don't quite work, like that there is an okayness in all of that, even if what we're feeling in a particular moment isn't okay. And obviously it's, there are many things that it doesn't feel okay to feel, that that we are inherently okay, like
Yeah.
just as we are. Like there isn't, in
We're
that
okay even when we're
sense.
not okay.
Right,
Yes.
right.
Yeah.
And that fixing energy, the kind of falling away of that, gives rise to something much gentler and kinder and
So
more
much better.
loving. And right, that's your experience too.
Yeah, it's kind of like just falling back into myself, you
Mm.
know? Like that's really that's the impression I keep getting because it was always out, out, out. And it's just like, oh, whatever is happening here is okay.
Yeah,
I don't have to fight it. I don't have to try to be different. Screw all that.
right, absolutely.
Right?
And you don't have to fight the fighting.
That's right.
Right, so it isn't like,
Yes.
I think this is,
Yes.
I've got a real bugbear about when you hear people say like, oh, you just accept that, and I've really, that really gets my goat.
Yeah.
Because I think that sets people up for a
We should
sense of,
never resist. I
right,
shouldn't I'm bad
absolutely.
more self-judgment. I'm bad for resisting. I shouldn't be resisting.
Right, right. That we can relish all of that on some level, even if in the moment it's deeply uncomfortable or very painful. There is something about the okayness of all of it, in all of its
Yes.
contradictory paradoxicalness. And I
Yes.
love what you say about falling back into yourself.
Oh,
That, yeah, that puts it so beautifully.
yeah. Finally, right?
Finally, absolutely. I mean, it's not for want of effort, right?
Oh, oh, no.
Right.
Lots of
It's
effort.
hard won in that sense, isn't it? And I do think there's something about the willingness, or the whatever that is, that we have shown up for ourselves in all the kind of various ways that we have. And I think that that's important, right?
Mhm.
And I'm guessing that for both of us, it also felt like we didn't have the choice.
Exactly. Yeah, there was no choice. It was like, I am I would rather die than not do this, if that makes
Right.
any sense.
Yeah, yeah, it
I
does.
have I have to do this.
Yeah,
There's no way I could have not done this.
yeah. It would be great to save. It would be really good to come back to death and to illness next time.
Yeah.
But what I'd really like to know, and just whatever comes to mind, for anybody who's listening to this, he's right in it now. He's in that hell. What would you like to say?
I actually feel teary because I know
Oh,
what you're going through and I feel for you and you are not alone and I love you and we love you. And I know it's hard, but please be gentle with yourself, have some compassion for yourself and listen to yourself. Drown out the other voices, listen to what is right for you. That's what I would have to say.
oh, that's beautiful.
Don't make me cry.
You've got me going now as well. Yeah, I particularly love that, what you just said at the end. Like, I really get that when you're in this desperate place, you're frantic for somebody else to give you the answers,
Yeah.
and they can't actually.
Right.
And I think yeah, even if people say that they can, or they try, or They seem to have some sort of certainty. They don't know how it needs to unfold for you. None of us do. We don't know.
Right.
So that, yeah, listen to yourself. Be as kind to yourself as you can possibly muster. And yeah, we love you. Julianne, thank you so much.
You're welcome.
An
Thank you so
absolute
much.
pleasure.
I love you.
I love you too, and see you next time.
Okay.
Bye.
Bye.